All right, guys, let's talk HRT. I know that there is so much confusion surrounding hormones, HRT, midlife, what's going on. And I want to help you understand what's going on so that you can make the best choices for yourself. If you don't know me, my name is Jen Behill. I have been in the fitness nutrition world for over 30 years. I've been working almost exclusively with women who want fat loss, want to add lean muscle. And as I approached my mid 40s, actually, I'd say early to mid 40s, I really started to hone in on women going through peri-menopause and having hormonal issues, understanding a deeper knowledge of how the metabolism works. And then, of course, I hit perimenopause, at least that I knew. I was aware of it towards my late 40s. So I wanted to give you my take on it in terms of as someone who deals with other women, but also my own experience, so that, again, you can make the best decisions for yourself. My job is just to inform you, to educate you. And I know there's a lot of misinformation out there. I know there's a lot of women who kind of want to look at HRT, but they're scared. My job is not to force you or to pressure you. It's just to let you know what's going on so then you can make informed decisions for yourself. So here's some things that you need to know. And then I'm going to explain to you, first, what I'm going to do is explain to you where some of this fear is coming from so you understand that, so you can educate yourself. I'm going to give you kind of a quick hormones 101 so you can understand what's going on without feeling like you need to have a PhD in endocrinology. And then I'm going to explain why I chose alloy this last time for my HRT prescription. Then I'll go through a timeline. So after why I chose alloy, if you're like, okay, this is perfect, what I need to know, you can dip out. But if you want to know my timeline and what led me here, it might give you some insight. Some of it could be very relatable to your own experience, but it might give you some perspective of what you might run into as you are going down this journey yourself. So here's what you need to know. The reason why most medical doctors, your GP, your gynecologist, endocrinologist, they're a little nervous or refuse to give you HRT or even talk about it is because of the Women's Health Initiative study from 2002. Now, I'm not going to go into the whole study. You can Google it. There's tons of information out there, but here's what you need to know. It was a study that linked risk factors to breast cancer, to female uterine cancer, things like that, based on HRT. And what you need to know is that it's been debunked. They have retracted almost all of their statements that they made regarding the risks of HRT because of the way they did the study. And what you need to know is that there is no situation where there are no risks, right? Everything we do has risks associated with it, but the risks of getting breast cancer from HRT are very minimal. Your risks of dying from breast cancer are extremely minuscule for most women. But the real risks of not having estrogen are an increased risk factor, greatly increased risk factor of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and osteoporosis. These are all studies that have been done that are legitimate studies. There's tons of information out there showing that this is actually true, that those are our risk factors. Our risk factors for those things are greatly increased without estrogen because estrogen is protective. There are also some studies out there linking this to Alzheimer's. Those I'd probably say are more in that like gray area where you'll see some studies that are like, yes, it is. And then there's some studies that are like, we don't really know this. We think it is, but we can't prove it yet. So those are your true risk factors. So you kind of have to go, risk versus reward. Which risk do I want to take when you're taking a look at this? Okay, so keep that in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is that all of your conventional doctors, your medical doctors, they really don't receive any education in menopause. Their standard of care is if you come in with symptoms, is to tell you if you're having some kind of symptoms, if you just don't feel like yourself, their standard of care is to either put you on birth control and or an antidepressant. That is the standard of care dealing with women in menopause. They're just telling you there's nothing you can do, it's just part of aging. Get through it. That is the standard of care. They're just not educated in it. So it's not really their fault. they don't know, that's where we need to make a change. If you decide to go with a conventional medicine practitioner, you are looking for someone who specifically deals with menopause, because it's just different. If you're in it, you know it. All right, let's do a quick hormones 101. Nothing crazy. And here's why I'm talking about this, and I will try to give you resources as we go along. I obviously am not a doctor, so I don't prescribe HRT, but I deal with hormones. So we're not just talking about sex hormones. When I work with my clients, we are talking their metabolism, their ability to burn fat and feel good. We're looking at hormones that lead up to these. They are in the hormone, what I call hormone hierarchy. So we deal with things like leptin, ghrelin, insulin, cortisol, your adrenal function, your thyroid function. We're looking at all of those things as lifestyle factors. And then once we get all of those in place, then if they want to take a look at some HRT or options with other things, then my job is to help steer them towards someone that can help them. So this is my effort to educate you so that you can find the right person to help you. All right, hormones 101. In terms of your sex hormones, there are lots of hormones in your body. As I just mentioned, a handful. We are specifically talking about your sex hormones right now, or a handful of them, the main ones. The first thing to understand is that HRT is not something foreign that you're putting inside your body. I hear this a lot where it's like, I just want to go a natural approach. And I'm like, estrogen is natural. It's something that your body produces. Testosterone is something that your body produces. When you go with an HRT route, depending upon which option that you choose, especially if they're bioidentical, those are the hormones that your body produces. So we're not doing something that is not natural. We are simply helping your body produce or give your body a hormone that it can no longer produce. There is no difference in this than giving somebody insulin if their body needs insulin, or if they need thyroid help. Those are also both hormones that most doctors have zero problem medicating people with. So keep that in mind. HRT is not a non-natural form of something. It just means that your body no longer feels the need to reproduce, and so those hormones start to drop off. Now, one thing that most women don't know is they think of testosterone as a male sex hormone. Now, granted, men definitely have higher levels of testosterone, but what most women don't realize is that when it comes to sex hormones, testosterone is the one we have the most of prior to perimenopause. We have more testosterone than we have estrogen or progesterone prior to perimenopause. It's a game changer. So testosterone and estrogen are your vibrancy hormones. They are your metabolic hormones. They are protective hormones. They're your get up and go hormones. They are stress resiliency hormones. They are your libido hormones. So if you're feeling like libido has dropped off the face of the earth, you're no longer motivated, all of those two hormones in particular are ones that we want to take a look at. So just know testosterone is not the negative thing, the scary thing that a lot of times people will make you think about. Now, we don't want too much of those hormones. We want that sweet spot that helps us be able to live optimally. So just keep that in mind. Now, let's talk about estrogen and progesterone. I'm going to give you an analogy so you can understand what's going on inside your system, and then you'll probably understand some of the symptoms that you might be happening and what you can do about it. So I want you to imagine that estrogen and progesterone are twin sisters. I learned this years ago, and I was like, this all makes sense now. So they're twin sisters, but they're not identical twin sisters. Okay, so estrogen is the extrovert. She's the one that she likes to go out and do stuff. She's just like, we'll be fine. She's kind of the party girl, you know, she likes to go out there. She's a little experimental. She likes to go try things. If things don't go well, she's like, it's fine, we'll be all right. And she just keeps on rolling, right? Like that is estrogen. She's vibrant. She's the one that, again, carries your libido. And she's like, let's go. That is estrogen. Estrogen is also protective to your joints. Estrogen is also protective to your bones, right? Now, her twin sister, progesterone, is the introvert. She's the one who'd rather stay home. She is the one who calms you, but she's also the worrier. So she's always telling her sister, like, hey, we shouldn't be doing that. We get over here, right? Like, so she's like, let's just stay home. Now, together, they work really well and they balance each other out. They are not static in nature. And this is what happens with women. And this is the difference. One of the big differences between men and women is that men do not get this cycle of hormones that we do. They don't get a testosterone cycle, right? We have a cycle where estrogen and progesterone cycle through in their levels. So when you are still menstruating, what happens is both those hormones kind of start at lower levels, right? And when you start your period, both of those hormones start to rise. Now, estrogen will rise faster than progesterone. And then about halfway through, they kind of do a little dance, right? And then they both drop back off, which is why as they're dropping back off and they're at the bottom, that's that whole PMS thing, right? That is menopause shortened. That's all that is both of those hormones have dropped off. Now think about this. When your vibrancy hormone, your stress resiliency hormone, your get up and go hormone drops off, all of a sudden your motivation dies. You're tired all the time. You're cranky all the time. Your joints start hurting. Things that used to be able to just roll off your shoulders, all of a sudden you just feel very stressed about. You feel very irritated about, right? That's estrogen dying off, lowering down. Progesterone, the calming sister, well, this is when you wake up at night, right? When you notice that your anxiety is going up, which is why a GP, their standard medical care, is to prescribe an antidepressant because anxiety starts to go up. Oh, you just need a little antidepressant, you'll be fine, right? So progesterone, when she dies off, all of a sudden you're more anxious. You're not sleeping as well. You don't recover as well. All of those things, right? So that's what the majority of women will start to experience as they go into perimenopause. Now, where this gets a little confusing is that those hormones don't die off. I should quit saying die off. They don't decrease evenly. What happens is progesterone and testosterone will start to drop, but estrogen, man, she is a fighter. So instead of just dropping off, she starts pinging wildly all over the place. She can be high, she can be low. Like in one day, she can go from being completely tanked to being extremely high. And if you are in perimenopause, in the most chaotic time of it, this is what is happening. Is she's not just dropping off, she's pinging. And what this feels like is when you go from being like no energy whatsoever, all of a sudden now you're crying, and the next minute you're raging and you're ready to get a divorce. Like you just know that your mood cycle is just way out of whack and you are very aware of it, right? That is more than likely estrogen pinging all over the place. So now that you've got that in place, and then eventually they all just kind of like drop back off. And then once you miss your period for an entire year, that day is menopause, and then after that is postmenopause. So that's how that works. Perimenopause can last anywhere from 8 to 12 years. They normally say about 10. Everybody's a little bit different. Symptoms will definitely be different. So you can just kind of at least start to recognize exactly what's going on. Now, I have been through, I started being aware of my symptoms when I was in my late 40s. I'm looking at my notes here to see what I missed. Yep, there it is. I'm going to take you through why I chose aloe, and then I'm going to give you I'm looking at my notes so I don't forget anything. I'm going to tell you why I chose aloe this time, but just know that I've had other practitioners. I'm going to tell you why I chose it this time, and then if that gives you the information that you need, you want to jump off, that's cool. If you want to know what happened that led me to this and be able to identify some of the things that might be happening to you or what could be in your future, and you think it might help you on your journey, then I would say, hang out, I'll explain what that is. So why I chose aloe this time. Here are the pros that I liked about it. I firmly believe that this should simply be the standard of care for women. This should not be so hard. You should be able to go for the amount that most people pay for insurance. I am a small business owner. So things like labs and basic care gets pretty pricey for someone like me. Unless you work for a big corporation, and they're paying for your insurance, this stuff can get really pricey. And most of your practitioners are just not going to run the labs, and they're just not going to get you HRT. So it's not the standard of care for women. And most women are having to bounce from practitioner to practitioner and spending a lot of money. I've spent a lot of money on this. In order to get some, what I firmly believe is basic standard of care. If you think about this, the risk factors that we face from not having estrogen are much higher than the risk factors of breast cancer. And if you think about it, what do we die from? It's the risk factors that I just talked about, right? So what I like about this is that I just feel that this should be so much easier for women to get this care. There are no labs required, and I'm going to talk about this in a second, so bear with me. There are no labs required to get HRT. We're going to talk about the pros and cons of that. But for me at that moment, it was definitely a pro. There was no initial practitioner cost or visit. The only practitioner investment I made was a one-time $49. It covers me for the entire year. I didn't have to visit them. There was no video televisit. It's all done online. You fill out an intake form, and then you can start messaging your practitioner, who is a medical doctor. Okay, and it was fast. Again, I'll give you the timeline here in just a second. So for me, I was just like, I'm so tired of going through this whole thing, which I'll explain in a second. I know what I need. I'm well versed in this. I just want my prescriptions, and I had run out. So it was a timeline that I was working with. The cons are that there's no labs needed, and we're going to talk about this in a second. There's pros and cons of that. They also do not do testosterone. They do estrogen, progesterone. They do vaginal estrogen, and then they have some other supplements and things that you can look at. I think they have an estrogen that you put on your face. Again, that one's kind of a try it. There are no clinical studies that prove it to be effective, but I know a lot of women who love it, so they do have it. So the downside is that they do not offer testosterone. And the reason I'm guessing because of this is that it's tough even for practitioners to get you testosterone. The lengths that I've had to go to get testosterone are pretty crazy. And so for most women, they end up doing pellets, which I also don't recommend because it can shoot your testosterone too high. We want that sweet spot. And so getting testosterone in a optimal level is challenging for women, and it's challenging for practitioners as well. And I feel like you have to go in with a certain level of knowledge, because if you don't, you may once again get prescribed something that you're just trusting someone. And again, it's just an intake. And if you don't know enough, I've seen I've seen on one of the boards, women saying like, I asked for this, and then they were like, hey, just take this birth control. And I'm like, oh, so like I've seen some things, and it's like I would be hesitant to have one of my clients do this without me holding their hand a little bit so that I can explain, not tell them what to do, but be like, this is what this one does. This is what this one does. If they say this, then maybe ask this question so that they feel very knowledgeable in whatever decision they make. And so that makes me a little hesitant in that, are they getting what is truly best for them, or in the mode that is best for them? There's different ways that you can actually take these medications. So those were the cons. But so far, I'm on board. So let me give you the timeline because it was fast. So I'm gonna give you the timeline. I filled out the intake form. It was $49. I did this on March 10th. Now, I took the information for my last prescription that I had gotten. I had been out for 2 months, and I took that information. They do ask if you're currently on hormones. And so I put that in, and I knew exactly what I wanted. Now, I also knew that I want to titrate my dose up, because when I started running out, I knew that it was time for me to titrate that dose up. But I knew that because I've been off for 2 months, that I didn't want to do that right out of the gate. So I asked for exactly what I was on prior to. I knew exactly what I wanted. So I was like, here's what I want. Told them what my symptoms were, that all lined up. I received a message back from my practitioner by 2 a.m. the next day. That's how fast it was. And I think they say 24 to 48 hours. That's how quickly I got mine back. She then said, she like gave me a long explanation. She doesn't know what I do. So she was like, here's how all of this works. Here's what I suggest. And then you can choose which treatment plans work the best for you. So again, like with estrogen, there's like 3 different forms that you can choose from. With estrogen, they always include progesterone, which is oral, just to protect your uterine lining. And then you can choose other options and kind of put it together from there. I chose my treatment plan that day, which was the 11th. I received my HRT package on the 18th. That is 8 days. Now, my total out of pocket, including the $49, was a little less than $450 for a 3-month supply of my HRT. Now, that included my estrogen. I got estrogen, which I got a patch this time, which is what I wanted all along, oral progesterone, and then I got vaginal estrogen as well. And this was one of the issues that I had with one of my practitioners. We'll talk about that in a second. So that was my total out of pocket, $450. So if that's what you're looking for and you have a basic idea of what you want, I think they're a great option. I think that, again, because I believe that this is the standard of care, that this should be this simple. And I love this about my experience with them so far. Let me explain to you now what led me to this place. I am currently about to turn 53. And I started having, I would say, light symptoms that I didn't really recognize as perimenopausal, probably in my mid 40s. But I believe I was either 48 or 49. I think I was 48. I remember that it was in November. um, and in a 30-day period of time, I gained 8 pounds, and I literally felt like my feet had just been taken out from underneath me. And I'm a healthy person, right? Like, this is what I do. So I work out regularly. I eat mostly whole foods. Yes, I eat some other fun stuff too, because that's just life. But so I'm not perfect, but it's like I'm doing pretty good. And I literally just had no symptoms of missed periods. I wasn't having like any like major sleep disruptions or anything like that. Like, I felt pretty good. And in a 30-day period of time, it was just like, oh, you're out. I couldn't function. I couldn't think. I was super emotional. I kept crying. I kept thinking that I needed to stop my business. I had a successful business and was like, I should just not do this anymore. Like, I knew that I was not myself. My partner knew I was not myself. And so I tend to go more towards a functional approach. But I thought, you know what? There's a doctor that I have insurance for. Let me just start there, because at least this way, if I can get her to run my labs, that's one expense that I don't have to cover. So I made an appointment with a woman right around the corner from my house. And I was like, okay, I'm going to, see my labs. I'm going to figure this out. And I went in, and she was a woman, I'm guessing she was in her 60s. And initially I was just like, oh, this is perfect. She's going to totally understand what I'm going through. I'm laughing. Here's why, is as I'm describing what's going on and asking for my labs, she started trying to talk me out of those labs. And I was like, wait, why will you not test my estrogen? And she was like, well, there's like 12 different kinds of estrogen. Like, I wouldn't even know what to put on the lab form. And I'm like, estradiol. Check the one that says estradiol, like that one. And then she went into, and maybe you've heard this before, well, it fluctuates. It's not going to mean anything. And we went back and forth. She wouldn't say she wouldn't, but she wouldn't order the tests. And she kept saying that they fluctuate. And I go, okay, well, then why are you ordering my cholesterol numbers? Don't those fluctuate? And she's like, well, yes. And I'm like, okay, so then why is it okay for my cholesterol numbers to fluctuate, but you won't test my estrogen because that fluctuates? And she couldn't give me an answer. Needless to say, I went home and lost it. I was so mad. First of all, I was hormonal, but I was also just really, really upset that this is the care that I got after being miserable and going in to get help from a woman. And now I can tell you, I understand she's not educated, and I have empathy for that. She did the best that she could with what she has, but at the moment I was pretty pissed. So I did my research. After getting over that, I did my research. I found a naturopathic doctor who was local. kind of local in Seattle. She kind of moved back and forth to a couple of different areas. She came highly recommended. Actually, one of my clients had found her and really liked her. I wanted to try a more natural approach. So got all my labs done. Her first visit plus the labs and my HRT was about $1,200. Now, oh wait, that was the functional daughter. That was not her. My naturopath, I did labs. Now I have access to labs, so I don't have other people do my labs. Usually I just like, you tell me what you want, I'll get the labs for you, because I can get them for everything I need for about 300 bucks, $300. So I ordered my labs, I had them sent to her. And what I found was, at least at this time and with this naturopathic doctor, was that she was very hesitant to prescribe hormones. Naturopaths like to do things that are natural. So I paid for her visit, which again was like $400 for her initial. Every time you change practitioners, you pay an initial practitioner fee, which is anywhere from $300 to $500. It's pretty standard, right? So I paid her for her initial visit. She looked at my hormones. She was very hesitant to prescribe hormones. She was very supplement focused rather than HRT focused. And so she kept trying to get me to take supplements for things. And I would take a few, but it was just like, I don't need to take 12 supplements. I need you to just prescribe me some HRT. Eventually she prescribed me some progesterone and testosterone, and she would not prescribe me estrogen. Again, that's that fear, right? This is a naturopath. Also, her mother had gotten breast cancer, so she had a bias. I found this out later, right? So I'm like, ah, and I even told her, I'm like, listen, I really like you. As a person, I think you're amazing, but I'm looking for somebody who not only gives me the help that I need, but I need to be able to turn my clients over to people, because I'm not a doctor. I can only take them so far. So those who want HRT, I need somebody who I can then go, you're in good care with this person, and they're going to take care of you. And I did not feel that with her. So I was like, let's keep looking. So then I found a functional practitioner who also had a conventional medicine background. She had been an RN and had extensive experience in female hormones. And I had watched several of her webinars, and I was like, oh, I really like this lady, super amazing. It was a televisit. Everything was great. So I sent her my labs. This is where her first visit, the HRT that she prescribed, it ended up being about $1,100-$1,200 to get started. Okay, so then we're starting. She put me on a very low dose of estrogen cream and testosterone. She put them together. And the reason that they like to do that is that they tell you that it saves you money. Now, here's what I found out that I did not like is, number one, for me, I did not like the cream. I know a lot of women do. But I didn't, because when you put it on, number one, you have to be very careful that you don't get it on I have a cat. You can't get it on your animals. She walks all over stuff. So I'm like trying to keep it contained. And also you put it on and it has to dry. So I'm like putting it on my thighs or my inner arm, or trying to put it places to let it dry where I'm not putting on clothes. And in winter, I live in Seattle, it's cold. So I'm just like wearing my robe around, trying to like let this stuff dry. I was having to do more clicks than she told me I was going to have to do. And I also didn't like that the estrogen and testosterone were put together, because then I couldn't adjust the dosage based on where I was at. Like I had no room. And that meant, and because it wasn't going through a pharmacy, right? I'm having to pay a lot for this estrogen testosterone cream. So I'm like, well, I can't titrate this very well. On top of all of this, then I was having a bunch of gut issues. So we ran more tests. There were more supplements. That was another $2,000. We did not agree on my care. She wanted me to be very low carb for extended periods of time. And I was like, I disagree. I know too much. And I know that I shouldn't be on low carb. I get what you're saying. We don't want to feed certain bacteria in my gut, but also you're going to if you drop your blood sugar too low, then cortisol goes up. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. And so that was an issue. And then when it all kind of came to head, during we were doing all of these gut testing, we also did my labs again. When we went 6 months later after being on my HRT, and I wanted to be reevaluated because I knew that she put me on a very low dose of estrogen called biased. I knew that I needed to titrate that up, but she wanted my labs in order to increase my dose. And I had just done them 3 months earlier. Now, most practitioners will do testing. They'll use your labs within 3 months, knowing that your panels will fluctuate day to day, just a little bit, right? And I had just missed the 90-day window. So she wanted me to do more labs. And I'm like, this is so expensive. And I'm just asking for a small increase in my estrogen and prescribed in a way where I'm not slathering myself. I had kept asking for the patches. I don't want to slather myself in this cream. And so she insisted that I get the labs. So here is what you need to know about labs. I do believe that people should get labs. I do believe that you should understand what those labs mean. You need to understand that labs, those panels, those hormones do not work in a vacuum. What one is doing affects others, right? So when you're looking at labs, and the way that most conventional doctors will read a lab is that they're looking at numbers, right? And they'll say, oh, everything's, within range. They don't look at the system as a whole. So just to give you an idea, an example, is that number one, when you're looking at labs with estrogen in particular, it fluctuates a lot. I mean, a lot if you're in perimenopause. So for her to need that lab made no sense because I'm like, it depends on when you take it. It could be super, super low or it could be super, super high. The only thing that could be indicative of what's going on is by looking at my FSH, which you have from 3 months ago. FSH is a follicle stimulating hormone, which as your body is trying to make itself produce more of your sex hormones, your FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, goes up. We already knew mine was elevated. My body was trying really hard to produce these hormones. And so at that point, I'm like, you want me to pay another $300 for labs, then pay you another fee just so I can get another expensive medication, and you're not even giving me the one that I want. I didn't want the creams anymore. So I was like, done with that one. So on the search again, and just so you guys know, this does happen, which is why I'm walking you through this. The third person that I found, this is a person that I found off Instagram. It is a male. He comes from a conventional background. He is a MD and PhD in gynecology with a functional medicine background as well. And I've always liked kind of that combination of both conventional medicine and functional medicine. I don't like to lean too far one way. I like to kind of have them married together. I liked his approach in that he was no nonsense. And that's really what I wanted. I wanted clear cut, here's what we need. And I thought, okay, this might work. I liked that he had the conventional and functional medicine background. So I was like, okay, here we go again. I paid $300 for my labs. He was $450 for our initial call. I ended up paying over $350 for my prescriptions. And then each follow-up call was $250. Here was my experience. I set my appointment up. I provided him my labs. He showed up over 20 minutes late. He never looked me in the eye. He took 10 minutes with me. He didn't listen to me at all. I had to push to be able to ask certain questions. And the whole time, in my head, I was like, my clients would never think to ask this. My clients would never push him and interrupt him to try to get these questions answered. He's just literally trying to roll over me, prescribe me something, and move on to his next $450 call. I asked for some specific things. Again, I'd been asking for this patch because the cream wasn't working for me. He didn't prescribe that. He said, we'll put it at a level where you will only need to do 2 clicks. It'll dry fast. You'll be fine. He put it together with testosterone. He put a little DHEA in there. And we'll go into that too. So he put it all together and then he gave me oral progesterone. He didn't prescribe what I asked. Then when I got my prescription, the dose was incorrect on both of them. These are expensive prescriptions. So I was like, all right, because I know enough, I can fiddle the around with these a little bit to find the right dosing on it, and then I'll just adjust it as I go. But my clients wouldn't have known how to do that, right? And again, I just felt like I know enough. And he rolled right over me. And I couldn't imagine ever sending one of my clients to him. So I let my prescriptions dose run out on those as well. I didn't catch it in time, which is why I ended up with a 2 month lapse where I ended up being off my hormones for 2 months, which was completely miserable. But to me, I was just like, listen, I don't want to have to go through this whole thing again. I've paid out so much money. You know what I mean? Like when we look at my labs, there's really literally nothing else wrong with me. It's just my sex hormones, right? There's nothing else, no cardiovascular stuff. My lipids are like everything is fine. Everything is great, optimal. And so I was looking at this and I'm just like, gosh, like I'm gonna have to pay, $300 again for my labs. Now I'm gonna have to go find another practitioner. I'm gonna have to pay another $450 for that. And then here's hoping that they give me what I want. I want a patch. I want it to be easy. I want this to be simple. And so I had seen Alloy before. One of the things I think that always kind of held me back was the fact that they didn't do lab testing. But this time I was like, you know what? I'm not somebody who never does lab testing. I do it, right? And so the reason that I did it is, again, it looked simple. And I firmly believe that this should be the standard of care for midlife women. Like this should not be hard. I don't think that women should have to work this hard or have to pay these out of pocket costs, which should be a standard of care. If this was happening to a man, they wouldn't be paying out of pocket. Doctors would be handling this, right? And so when we're looking at labs, here's what I want you to know. I do believe that you should be getting a good profile of labs. And if you ever want to know which labs I think you should get, you can always just DM me on Instagram. I will send you a list of the ones that I think that you should get. I think because hormones don't work in a vacuum, you're not just looking at your sex hormones, you're looking at other factors and you're looking at the body as a whole. And I do believe that that is important. But when it comes to being in perimenopause, if you're in perimenopause, especially when you're in the thick of it, your estrogen is going to be pinging all over the place. That number doesn't mean anything. And I've argued with other functional practitioners and they're like, well, we can tell. And I'm like, how can you tell? That doesn't make any sense that you can tell other than FSH, which also is going to fluctuate. So you can't really tell because estrogen is fluctuating so much. You can't tell if that prescription is actually increasing those amounts overall. It's your levels are still going to fluctuate a little bit, right? So what they do is instead of using lab testing, they use symptom-based treatment. And what they're looking for is energy levels, libido, yes, hot flashes, depression, like they go through a whole list of things and they're looking at that. And basically they will base their recommendations on treatment based on symptoms instead of just using labs. I believe both are great. And personally, I am still going to use labs to influence my treatment because I don't want to just be symptom free. I want my levels to be optimal, which again is a sweet spot for everybody, but I want to not only not have symptoms, but I also want to put myself in the best situation to lower my risk factors for cardiovascular disease, for diabetes, for osteoporosis, and possibly Alzheimer's, right? So like I don't want all of my hormones tanked. I want to put myself in as best a situation as I possibly can. So I will still use labs to do that. Again, things like FSH can clue us in as to what's going on. And on a lab, if any doctor looked at my labs right now, they would say I'm menopausal. But I'm not because I haven't made it a full 12 months. I'll go like 3 or 4 and then I'll pop a period and then we start all over, right? So it's just because my FSH is high. So you can't just rely on those labs. So I will tell you that they do require that you have a negative mammogram within the last 2 years. Mine was just beyond the 2 years because I had to have it for the functional doctor. So I had gotten that, and it was just beyond that. And my doctor with Alloy said, I have the ability to write you one prescription, but you have to get a mammogram before that can get refilled. So I basically have 3 months to get a negative mammogram to them, which I think is very fair, and I'm totally fine with that. So just know that that is something that you're going to have to do. I will still, the other con is that I will still have to find somebody to help me with my testosterone because I do want to get on low doses of testosterone. And I know that I'm still going to have to walk my clients through this just a little bit. But I feel like at least it's easy enough that they're not fighting. They're not, number one, putting out a ton of out of pocket money just to find a practitioner that is not a good match because you don't know until you're sitting in front of them. And even then, if you don't know what all this means, you're just taking their word for like what's best. And you do have different options. So hopefully that helps. Again, my goal is never to convince you that you need to be on HRT. My goal is to educate you so that you can decide if HRT is for you and the decision that you want to make for yourself, and then know what your options are and know enough that when you're sitting in front of a practitioner, you know what works for you and what doesn't. And that's my goal. So that's it. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to shoot them over to me on Instagram. Just DM me. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Hope this helps, and we'll talk to you soon.